European Cardiothoracic Association, as well with the Basic Science Committee and us from HEIJKOOP, to try to join the efforts to do and to show to the people that we need to work together in the idea that when you have patients that are under the therapy of ECMO, that is for replacement of the lung or heart function, we can even consider in those cases that there is some possibilities that in case that those patients will not evolve perfectly, it could be even considered as a potential donors. And there is the fact that we need to focus on this point and all together work on that.
Yeah, because the session was titled The Great ECMO Challenge.
Exactly.
So let's unravel that a bit. What is the key challenge here that was on the table yesterday?
When we are offering or considering the possibility of doing an ECMO, is to replace lung or heart function.
Yes.
And that is a perfect accepted therapy actually, and it's very successful and it's increasing a lot in Europe and in all the world. But the idea is that when those patients cannot be really recovered from what that happened to them, or even for the previous encephalic damage that has been caused by the car arrest that requires to put in an ECMO, those cases could evolve badly. And instead to say, okay, there is no more for those patients, we cannot do anything, just to try to evaluate, talk with all the team and say it could be considered a potential organ donor. And then we do a multidisciplinary evaluation of those cases. Altogether, cardiologists, surgeons, nephrologists, intensivists, and the transplant coordinators. And that is the main focus and the idea.
Because you say, until this point, or normally, these people would not even be considered as donors.
Very rarely. There are some...
because they are considered too damaged, or why are they
too
not
damaged,
on the list?
exactly. They are considered too damaged, and maybe they say there is no recovery option, no recovery of the lung or the heart, and they say, oh, we cannot do anything more, unfortunately for that patient. But then we can even consider that donation will be part of this end-of-life care. And that's the idea that in some countries it has been done, some publications have been recently done about that from the intensivists, but there is only very few percentage of the possibilities of those cases that are taken into account. And then that's why we did this multidisciplinarity. And it has been really attended by a lot of people, well accepted by the people, but it requires multidisciplinary discussion.
Why? What are the pros and cons from the different perspectives?
Well, the main point is that you can approach to that, but you need to talk with the people that is engaged in the ICU, in cardiology, and in ECMO therapy, and nurses, and all the people, even the patients, to tell, okay, we are offering this to save the patient life and to allow him to recover from heart or lung dysfunction. But in the case that it was impossible because there is no possibility to recover, or an additional brain severe damage because of complication of the ECMO therapy, or a previous brain damage, then this person can be considered as a donor. And actually, most of the cases, the people say no option, no viability, no, it's a futile treatment for the patient to continue with that, and then they stop. And even before stopping, we should think it could be a potential donor, and then there are some groups that are now working on that, but there is a lot of reluctance.
Why? Where's the resistance towards that?
Because the people say we are talking about a patient to treat the patient, and they stop when the patient dies, when the patient finishes, and they don't seek anything more. And it requires to think in a further step.
So would it be fair to broaden that in general? So this is not per se related to ECMO, but in general there should be more awareness that when a therapy fails, you can still move on.
Exactly. You can still be a donor. If a therapy fails and your life cannot be saved, you can still be a donor. And even those cases, the ECMO therapy, the strategy of the ECMO therapy can be used in some cases already donors, already brain dead patients, or patients that have a very unstable hemodynamic situation because of the brain dead situation, that can be recover the organs using the ECMO strategy. So it's like using that to recover the organs in patients that have been already diagnosed of brain death. And it's something that requires a big involvement of the group, and thinking in advance, not only we are not anymore able to treat the patient, but we are able to treat the organs and to recover the organs.
But I guess it's very difficult to understand or to organize where do you cross the line. I've always learned, I'm from the Netherlands, I believe it's a case that never the same team that tries to save my life could be the team that also tries to harvest my organs. So how does that happen here?
It requires a big change in the mind of not only healthcare professionals, but as well the society. The society follow what we are offering them and what is our trust and our convincement. And the point is that if you are able to transmit to the society that this patient, you are offering all as much as you can, you don't have a conflict of interest in doing that because you have offered to the family, you express and you explain to the family all, and when the treatment fails, you say, okay, we cannot do any more sin, but we can even consider this possibility. So it is considered by the family not as something against the patient or against the family. It's something that we are offering all a complete approach. And this requires change your mind, change your conception. Donation cannot be conceived as something at the end, when all is finished. It must be conceived in a very severe and critical situation, in any very severe and critical situation, that of course our responsibility is to treat the patient and to recover. But if we fail because we cannot do that or there is any additional complication, then we can consider the other possibility.
And I guess the key lesson that our viewers can take for this, that this might almost seem obvious when you're in the field of transplantation, but in the broader scope of the hospital, a lot of people are not even aware of this.
Exactly, because you are all the day working on that. So you can conceive that as a normal thinking of way. But you need to talk with your colleagues. You need to talk with the nurses, with the social workers, with all the colleagues, technicians in ECMO and all, and to say this is not something against the patient. It's not that you don't do what you need to do. It's that we can't all together be part of this chain to transform severe critical cases that could become a donor.
Beautiful.
And this is what we need to do.
Important message. I was glad you had the session yesterday. I'm even more glad that you are watching this session. And well, I guess the call to action is clear, right?
Yes.
Share the knowledge and make people part of this journey.
Exactly. And as well, work multidisciplinary. That is the main point. We cannot work alone.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on this bike ride to Copenhagen.
It's like we're working together, okay? Nice journey. Thank you.
So I'm walking around at the trade show of the ESOT 2019 Congress in Copenhagen, and I ran into John Piano, who is the founder, chairman and CEO of Transplant Connect from California. John, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you. We're having a great event. This is such a wonderful conference, and we're excited to be part of it.
Yeah, so let's try to figure out why you are here. Your iTransplant platform, who is that for?
So the iTransplant platform is a real-time electronic medical record platform, and it's really for use by the various medical organizations in the donation and transplant field. So organ recovery agencies, hospitals, transplant centers, tissue banks, eye banks, researchers, regulators, governments. There's a whole ecosystem that makes the donation and transplantation process work. And really what the iTransplant platform is think of it as the operating system, cloud-based, secure, for the entire ecosystem.
And if we would take this camera to your clients, what is the key benefit that most of them celebrate?
Well, before us, the process largely took place on paper. So imagine 40 or 50 pages of paper forms filled out often in the middle of the night. These donor cases occur, someone's passed away from, unfortunately, in an accident, it might be in the middle of the night. So it's 2 a.m. and they're filling out pages and pages of paper forms, signing them, trying to do mathematical calculations at 2 a.m. and that all disappears with us. Now it's a simple to use, web-based system that they can log on to their computer, very easy to use, automated calculations, it does a lot of the work for them. And I think it just turns a very arduous, difficult process into something that's relatively streamlined. It's still very complex, but it's relatively streamlined. it's not only about having a more convenient job, it's about saving and healing more lives. And our system does directly, because we're expediting and streamlining the way they do their work, we're allowing them to do more, and ultimately that translates to more donors, more transplants, more lives saved. And that's really the bottom line behind all of this.
Sounds fantastic. Now, if people have missed the opportunity to meet you here in Copenhagen, where can they go online to find more information?
So our website is simply www.transplantconnect.com, and we're at many of the conferences. We'll be at the Tissue Banking Conference, AETB, in Toronto next week, and we're at many of the conferences around the world from time to time. So, but www.transplantconnect.com is how you can find us.
So Alex, it's great you've taken time away from Paris to come to Copenhagen and cycle along the roads with me here. It's very good of you to do that. So listen, I was going to tell you know your JAMA paper recently. That's created quite a storm, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a nice story because. So what we wanted to do is to compare the practice patterns between two countries, France and United States, to see what was the difference in terms of allocation and resource and the use of organ procurement, kidney procurement.
Yeah.
And so it was very nice, to compare, and to take our differences to draw some meaningful conclusion. The main conclusion actually was that the donor age was very different from United States as compared to France, meaning that we are taking older and older donors. And the consequence is that from many of the kidneys that are recovered for transplant and then discarded, many of them would have had a 100% chance of being transplanted in France. So we were really struck by these results.
So, I mean, what are you saying? Are you saying that the US is potentially discarding kidneys that could have provided good transplants to people?
Yeah, exactly. Not to say all discarded kidneys in the US could have been used, but among the 3,500, which is quite a lot, it's what we transplant in France every year. Many of those kidneys could have provided survival benefit to the patients.
So why is that happening in the US, do you think? I mean, we have colleagues, we have colleagues in the US, they think very similar to us. So why is that happening?
I think it's a very complex question, but most of that is related to the disincentives and the report cards, meaning that the scrutiny that the procurement system has on the institution made the surgeon and the nephrologist kind of reluctant to use the kidney because we know that they will provide a little bit lower graft survival as compared to perfect deceased donor kidneys. So this disincentive and the report cards made that they started to be afraid of pushing the limits.
Okay.
And I think that's the main difference with what Europe in general has taken.
So so in France, do you not have that scrutiny? I mean, in the UK, we have scrutiny of units, we have CUSUM triggers. I will be asked to look into a unit. Do you not have that?
We do have an allocation system and an allocation score, but I think that in France, but it was the same also in Spain, in Italy, and within Eurotransplant, that they kind of embarked 10 years ago with the All for All programs, providing kidneys from all donors to all recipients, with the hypothesis that many patients on the waiting list are getting older and they're on dialysis, and this is really bad for them in terms of quality of life, quantity of life, and also cost for society.
Right. And do you think that one of the things that we're missing out is that we shouldn't be comparing one transplant with another? We should be sometimes comparing transplant with waiting list, from time on a waiting list.
Sure, you're absolutely correct. And so first of all, from a methodological standpoint, it's very difficult to compare patients having a transplant to waitlisted patients just because there are some obvious indication bias. But now the methodology and the math allowed us to explore doing some kind of propensity matching scoring, finding the best match on the waiting list. And I think it's your remark is absolutely true. We need to dig that a little bit, further, and to draw and to change this gray area and give recommendation based on a data-driven approach.
It's one of the things we've done in the UK is to quote survival from times on the waiting list rather than times from transplantation, and I think that's a really very important message to get across. But in the US, where do you think this will have quite an impact, the paper?
So first of all, there was quite a nice alignment of stars, because you are aware that there was this White House order, executive order, which came out in July, and then the paper was released in August. So the paper was kind of aligned with the unmet needs stressed by this executive order. And the main message was that we need more kidneys, we need to increase donation and organ procurement. And one of the, it's not all about better use of deceased donors, but you have the kidney pair donation system, the use of Hep C kidneys. But I think this resource of the kidneys recovered and discarded could translate into huge benefit for the US society. So taking the example of Europe to draw a conclusion and provide paths towards improving the allocation system in the US is kind of cool.
Okay. Now, we're nearly where we want to be on our bike ride, but just briefly tell me, I know you've got another paper out in the BMJ, like almost in the last few minutes.
Exactly, that's the iBox paper you're referring to. Oh yes, that was the last 7 years of my life, so I'm quite, very happy, about the outcome. And the integrative box is really making sense with allocation, but also moving downwards, in patients who get a kidney transplant. It's basically a risk prognostication system that provides patients and clinicians with a really high predictive performance, the likelihood of the kidney to fail in 3, 5, 7, and 10 years, plus the patient trajectory with time. Big consortium, 19 centers, 4 randomized controlled trials, a lot of efforts, a lot of struggle. So I'm getting gray hair.
So what you're trying to do is to get surrogate endpoint, is that right? So that which will help hugely in terms of trials and new interventions that we are doing.
You're completely right. I think our field really needs surrogate endpoint, because we cannot stand with the current state of the art for prognostication, where we wait for 10 years to have the hard endpoints. We need something earlier, something robust, something that meets the requirement from agencies. And we need that. The patient need that. We need new drugs, new drug development. So we need to embark upon the next generation clinical trials, where the computer assistant will project patients on the long-term run. Okay.
Well, I guess, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that you're getting all of this data with your group, and I hear your group were the winners in the ESOT what was it, the pro working together team. So I'm impressed. Keep up the good work. It's been a fantastic ride. It's been great to run along the Copenhagen trails with you. Thank you very much, and see you again.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hello and welcome back here, live from the Bella Center in Copenhagen at the ESOT 2019 Congress, where I'm now joined in this coffee break on a little bike tour through Copenhagen, a virtual bike tour, by ESOT's newly appointed CEO, Luca Sargentina. Luca, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. We're biking along, and I'm very curious to get to know you a little bit better. So let's start with the beginning. How did you become the new ESOT CEO? What journey led up to that?
It's a very long journey, actually. Like every executive director or CEO of an association, we come from such a different background. And mine in particular, I got a degree in veterinary medicine, and then I went through a very weird career. I started with a startup. I got into medical publishing. That's how I got into medicine. Then I went into communication. I had my own agency. Then I managed events. And then at one point I thought, oh, it would make sense to put together all these skills and expertise in something that does all these things: communication, events, publishing, right? And that's an association. So that's how I got into the International Society of Nephrology, where I was executive director for 10 years. And it was a fantastic experience. It's a global society, so I got to travel to Vancouver, Cape Town, Melbourne, sometimes in the same month. And after 10 years of managing this association and developing the association, I felt I was only managing a team of 36, doing HR, doing finance, and I thought, what I really like is to put my hands into projects. And so I resigned for ISN, and after 2 months I got a call saying, Luca, the previous CEO of ESOT, Annalisa, is leaving. Why don't you consider coming over? And that's how we started.
Wow, wow.
I'm
A very rich and
here.
diverse background. Already nephrology, somewhat related to this
Little bit.
field. However, I guess people in the transplantation field would say, well, that's just one organ. What is it like coming from a more specialized field to this very broad community?
I was very surprised when I came in because, as you say, there is some connection. I knew some of the people, but for me, it's a completely new experience. And I was surprised to see that compared to nephrology, which is a very traditional specialty where nothing really new happened after dialysis about 40 years ago, it's a little bit of the same thing. Here, there is innovation, there is incredible energy, despite the fact that there are not many new drugs. There are technologies, there is a spirit of innovation that I really like and I really want to learn from to put even more innovation in what we do as an association.
Interesting, interesting. What is your wish when you look forward and now you have your hands on the wheel? What is your wish for the community?
I certainly have many wishes and I hope to be able to put at least a couple of them in practice in a couple of years. And it's fantastic to see that my wishes, when I came in, really coincide with the president's and the leadership wishes. So we want to build an even more inclusive ESOT community by really including everyone, not just surgeons and physicians, but we really want to open it up to everyone who is contributing to the transplant success, coordinators, nurses, allied professionals, dietitians, and most importantly, patients, right? Everybody talks about empowering patients, giving them an input into clinical trials and into decisions, but we want to really do it.
Interesting.
So that would be the main thing. If we can make that happen while continuing all this innovation and all these wonderful congresses here that we do and research projects, that would be a good achievement, I think.
Well, sounds like something wonderful to look forward to. Thank you for sharing that. Now, this just a first get to know you. For those people who watch this who are actually physically in Copenhagen, I understand tomorrow morning there is a 8:45. There's a meet and greet with you. Where can people find you that day?
Yeah, I will be at the online education table in the middle of the exhibition near the ESOT booth. So if you want to get to know me, I'll be very, very pleased to shake hands.
Perfect.
Yep.
If you miss that opportunity, obviously you can always send an email to executive@esot.org, right?
And we'll see at some ESOT events.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing this bike ride with me. Very nice to meet you. And as Lucas says, this community is very innovative. There's a very, very innovative spirit. And what is happening here at Congress is that the innovative spirit is even leveraged more by a new award, the Leonardo da Vinci Award. And earlier I met up with Vasilios Papalois and Luca Totti to figure out what that award is all about.
Any international congress has got its awards, but we try to find out something new.
We never had the one award that will be the ultimate prize, if you wish, the Nobel Prize of Transplantation in Europe and beyond, that will attract to the ESOT Congress the best work being done across the world in the field of innovation and research in transplantation. Recognize that, trumpet that, and use it as motivation for other colleagues to engage in the field of transplantation. The establishment of the Leonardo da Vinci Award serves exactly that purpose.
There is nothing better than Leonardo da Vinci. He's a sculptor, he's a painter, he's a scientist, he's an architect, he's everything. We choose this name because we want to focus how the transplant professional people can cover many fields.
Leonardo da Vinci is Europe Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest artists, the greatest innovators of all times. And this is the message we want to send.
We try to find out the 10 best abstract.
After a lengthy process with the initial scoring of all the work that was submitted to the Congress and another filtering by the Scientific Program Committee, another filtering by the organizing executive, and finally another filter by distinguished editors of scientific journals, we will have the finalists, and those abstracts and this work is going to be presented in this great session.
And people in the audience will be a part of the judge, and they will be voting for giving the best abstract.
And I'm truly looking forward to this session that will define the future of the ESOT Congress.
Yes, and we're still here live at the Bella Center at ESOT 2019 Congress during the coffee break, riding our bikes through Copenhagen. And if you're just tuning in, you can be witnessing the Leonardo da Vinci Award ceremony, which is about to start in 10 minutes. If you hop over from YouTube and Facebook towards ESOT's educational platform, Transplant Live, which is at esottransplantlive.org. But let me introduce my new companion here on the bike, and actually this setting is very suitable. DIETHARD from Leuven in Belgium, one of the founders of Transplant, and you and a few of your team members were bicycling from Belgium to the Copenhagen Congress. We'll get to that in a minute. What is the background story of your Transplant initiative?
Well, in 26, I met a patient on the clinic who was in need for a kidney transplantation, and he asked me if he could do before and after transplantation, if he could climb the Mont Ventoux, which is a famous mountain in the south of France.
Yeah, big cycling challenge.
Absolutely. And I thought, yes, you can. And you know what? After your transplantation, I'll join you. At the same time, we had our 10th anniversary of our unit, and we invited Patricia Painter, who really did a lot of work, pioneering work on exercise and after transplantation, and I was really inspired by those two. So we started climbing Mont Ventoux, and we've been back ever since.
All right. And since that time, for 10 years now, you have been climbing with a big group. I think we have a photo of the 2019 group. Let's see if we can see that on the image. Yes, yeah. There you are. How many people joined you this year?
This year we went to the Mont Ventoux with almost 300 people. But let me tell you that this is our flagship. We learned that this is an event. It's nice to have an event, but it does not give you a sustainable physical activity. So you need to stimulate them all the time. Same for us. You need a purpose, something to do, to work to, but on the other hand, you need to stimulate them all the time. So we really made a community, and we really started a campaign to keep on moving.
Exactly, because that's the key purpose, to get... Yeah. Is it specifically focused on transplant recipients, or is it broader by now?
Well, it's broader. I mean, we have all stakeholders involved. Of course, in the center are the transplant recipients, but we also invite all their family, their friends with them, because if you be active in a community, it's better for the sustainability. We also have medical personnel that's involved. We have volunteers, sponsors, and also donor families or life donors that join us. So it's becoming a big community now.
So basically this initiative has allowed you to kind of create momentum and nudge transplantation recipients and their community to a healthier lifestyle.
Absolutely, and I have a strong feeling that this will become the machine perfusion hype, to say so, in a few years' time.
Yeah, because then obviously we're in a scientific congress.
Absolutely.
Are you doing any science-driven research into
Absolutely,
this?
That's what we are promoting, and we have four purposes. First is create awareness, which is important. Second, motivate the recipients to be active. And third is also the scientific input. So we try to do research, but we also create a platform. And we actually have created a symposium around this whole physical activity. And that symposium is called Time to Move, because that's what we feel. We should move and keep on moving.
Now, I would say the healthier lifestyle seems to be a big trend throughout society.
Absolutely.
where or what are the specific challenges or elements of doing this in a donor-recipient community?
I think the first thing is the awareness, to know that there are benefits and to prescribe it. Because
but that's for everyone, right?
That's for everyone.
Whether you're a patient or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think raising awareness on this subject amongst transplant physicians is the first. We also should understand what are the facilitators and barriers, because it's so easy to prescribe, but we don't do it. So why is that? So that's a challenge there.
Aha, so you say we prescribe it as a therapy, but then now actually you as a doctor are leading by example, so to speak, right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I also personally then I practice what I preach.
Exactly.
And it motivates me enormously.
Well, let's zoom in on that, because after 10, 11 years of going to the Van-Toe, you guys decided you wanted to come to Copenhagen. Take me back to the moment. Who was it that said, shall we jump on a bike?
It was my crazy idea, in fact, and I love crazy ideas. And also my children were very proud of me, because I would really reduce my carbon footprint as well. So back theme as well. So in the end, it all comes together.
Of the four of you who joined you. Tell us, who do we see here?
Okay, well, we have Mark. Mark is a liver transplant recipient. Then it's me and Stefan. Stefan is our scientific coordinator. I have 2.5 people that, well, 2.5 full-time equivalents that work for us. And the right is one of our volunteers, Johan, and Johan is actually the employer of Mark. And they were there from the beginning, and so they looked after us as two fathers. So that we had food and rest. They followed us with the camper, so there is a little carbon footprint.
Every now a break.
Yeah.
And what day did you? How far is it?
In total, it is almost 900 kilometers, so 600 miles. And we started off last Tuesday, and we cycled about 220 kilometers a day. And the last day was a bit more tricky, because we had also to cross the water from the north of Germany to Denmark, and then there was another 150k here in Denmark.
All right, and how did it go on the route? Any
it was
adventures?
It was a fabulous experience. It was a fabulous experience. I could do a little, being an academic or an academic, I did a little observational study between the cycling paths, comparing, for example, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, all those things. So it was great. In fact, the guy that was the inspirator for Transplant 2 created the routes. So it was back to the roots, and he did a great job. And it's great to be outside, even if it's a bit raining or a bit chilly. It's a great feeling.
And physical, did you all come out well? How is it to be back on a bike here now?
I love it.
Yeah,
I just love it.
Must be very great. All right, well, great story. Thanks for sharing. Let's sum up and get some takeaways for the general audience. You already mentioned, you think healthier lifestyles should be standard therapy.
I think that the introduction of physical activity should be initiated as soon as possible after transplantation, in order that people use their muscles. It's also a tool to prevent some of the complications that they go through. It's also a way for them to show gratitude to their donor, and it also brings people together. That's why it's called Transplant 2 Connected for Life. It brings everything together. It's becoming a community, and I'm very proud to be here.
Yeah.
So thank you, ESOT, for having us.
Yes, of course. And then the second takeaway, I guess, is that when people say, okay, I'm going to do this, but as a doctor, you should lead by example, right?
Exactly. And what I can also proudly announce is that we have, if you want to know more about it, we have a symposium on that.
When is that? Where can
next year, 7th and 8th of February in Leuven, there is the Time to Move symposium with state-of-the-art lectures, abstracts, and also workshops, really hands-on.
Aimed for healthcare professionals?
For all healthcare professionals that work with transplant recipients.
Perfect, very interesting. Well, DIETHARD, thank you very much for sharing this story.
It's great.
It's a remarkable story, and thank you very much for joining us on that as well. Welcome here back live from the Bella Center, where it's time for the Monday afternoon tea break. And as you are live with us on Facebook and YouTube, you get the latest and the greatest news, because I'm now joined by the first official winner of the ESOT Leonardo da Vinci Award. I'll hold it up for you right here. It's Emily Thompson. Emily, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
If you haven't followed that session online, make sure you join us on ESOTTransplantLive.org, where you'll be able to see a rebroadcast of your session, where you were with 5 other finalists.
Yeah.
Very tense, because when you walked in, you didn't know yet whether you would come out as a winner.
No.
You all presented your papers,
Yep.
very innovative work, and then there was a vote,
Yeah.
and you came out as a winner.
I know.
How are you feeling?
Surprised and very, very happy. Yeah, I can't really believe it. There's the other contestants. I was sitting there listening to their stuff, thinking, "Wow, this is great." So yeah, I feel very privileged.
Well, let's take our audience a bit into the journey that you have been going through, and what you've been doing that is apparently so incredibly innovative that the editors of the leading transplantation journals and the audience here thinks it should win. The title of your paper was Reconditioning Marginal Human Kidneys Using Multi-Stem, which is a trademarked technology, cell therapy delivered during normothermic machine perfusion. Let's unravel that a bit. One of the things I heard that the editors picked up on was the fact that you used human kidneys instead of animal models.
Yeah, so this project is quite at on that translational spectrum. So we're using kidneys that had been turned down for clinical transplantation and putting them on machine perfusion and then delivering a human stem cell product. So it's as close to what we would actually do if this therapy was in the clinic as you can possibly get. So not a mouse model, not cells in vitro, which I think probably might have been why there was an interest in it.
Yeah, and for people who haven't had the chance to Google your background, you're still in your PhD phase.
Yep.
You've been working on this project for about 3 years,
Yep.
you just said me. Can you share me the moment which sparked the imagination of setting out on this journey?
I think normothermic perfusion has been a big, shift in how everybody thinks in transplant, and cell therapy always seemed like an obvious marriage to me with transplantation, but it's difficult to achieve successful cell therapy because when you deliver them in the vein, they'll get stuck in the lungs. So actually getting them to the kidney is difficult. But if you have a kidney on a machine, you can get those cells straight in. And so it was from there that I just pursued it further and further. And it seemed to work out quite successfully.
Yeah, so basically you say it's an opportunity that arises from this whole new development, and earlier we had our ESOT president talking about a new phase in transplantation where the organ is ex vivo and we can do all these kind of things with it.
You can do all these exciting things, cell therapies, gene therapies, specific drugs that you maybe wouldn't want to give to a patient because they're toxic. So it's really exciting.
And can you share a little bit about your research setup? What did you set out to do?
So you get a text message that tells you that the kidneys have been turned down for transplant. You accept the kidneys, they get delivered to the hospital, surgically prepare them, put them on the machines, and I would have both kidneys going simultaneously. One has the stem cells and one's the control. And I think that's one of the reasons this model's been so nice, because you can really tease out the effect of the cells. And that's one of the benefits of doing kidney research. In the liver, you can't have a spare liver from the same donor, so that's how we did it, and we took samples of everything, and then we also did scanning of the kidneys whilst they were perfusing to make sure there wasn't clots in the system, and yeah.
And just checking, what did you do to control kidney? Nothing, or just normal perfusion?
What the cells had been suspended in was just what we gave them, so it's just like a vehicle control.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And now, take us to the results. What did you find? What happened?
So my first objective was just to kind of prove that you could put cells in the circuit, because to me a bolus of 50 million cells could clog up the kidney. So we wanted to make sure that it still peed, there was still blood flow, there wasn't any changes in metabolism, and so we're trying to establish that it's feasible. And then we look to see, okay, it's feasible, what's it doing? Is it changing cytokines? Is it changing biomarkers? And it was. And then it was the machine perfusion's great because you can do all these studies, but you can't understand what might happen after transplant by the machine. So then we took the samples and then put it back into other models to try and understand what might happen after transplant. And then thirdly, we wanted to know, after we put the cells in the kidney, where they were going, what they were kind of sticking to, where they were ending up, were they going to damaged areas. So there was a tracking
And
element.
how did you research that?
So they were labeled with a fluorescent dye before they went in. So you could take sections of the kidney and find the cells. And also we kind of drained the circuit, spun it through a filter and captured out the cells that were circulating in the machine. So you could kind of understand both compartments.
What stayed
what's
left
in the
behind
kidney and what's
what
circulating.
still circulating.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And well, in your title, it specifically mentions the normothermic perfusion. Why was the temperature so important?
So one of the other experiments we did was with cold perfused kidneys and put the cells in, but they just wash round, which is what we expected, but we felt we had to show that as well.
Yeah, to double check.
You need a metabolically active organ so that you can put in metabolically active cells so that they can interact. If you didn't have normothermic perfusion, it would just be a washing round effect.
Exactly. And to you now, what was one of the most surprising outcomes of your research? What was something you really didn't expect?
So I think it was when we were scanning the kidneys, because I devised that experiment because I was worried that there might be clots. And so I was trying to prove, hopefully, that it didn't cause any blockages. But what we actually saw was the total opposite, was that the blood flow opened up and you got new blood flow in hypoxic areas of the kidney, which was a great finding for us. And it also helped us kind of understand the mechanisms of how the cells are working. So we think they're going to hypoxic areas, becoming part of the tissue, releasing their secretome, and then they're reconditioning those areas, which is something that's very difficult to do with just a drug-based therapy because it doesn't have that biological ability to get to where you need it.
And develop in the place where they live. Wow, amazing. And well, this has been finished. Research done and dusted. Award won. The second award already, I understand. You also won the award at the British Society of Transplantation. So what's next? Where are you taking this?
So hopefully, we feel that this is almost there, ready to take to the clinic. There's probably a few more things we need to work out. The dose we used was a dose based on what they use in whole patients, so we did an equivalency. But we probably need to try lower doses, higher doses, and see if we still get the same effect. But after that, it's
because are there drawbacks? Are there side effects that you want to make sure you minimize the doses?
I think maybe not. That product, they always like high doses, and they think that higher doses are more effective. And on the machine, there's no human attached that you could let the higher doses might cause a problem with. But I think it's just that's a requirement of the regulators to make sure you've got the correct dose. Yeah. So that would be
that need to be figured out, and once we have that,
potentially
clinical testing.
That's my hope, but it's never quite as easy as that. But I do think if we can get the funding to take it to a trial, we'd start in patients with marginal kidneys, putting them on the machine and seeing if we can get them to a transplantable level and implanting them.
Well, very, very exciting work. Now, winning the ESOT Leonardo da Vinci Award not only comes with eternal bragging rights. I mean, there's nobody else who can claim I was the first who won this award. It also comes with a 10,000 euro grant.
Very nice.
Everybody wants to know, how are you going to spend it?
I think the rest of the Newcastle team have also been asking, and we're probably going to go out for quite a nice dinner. Yeah. I'm sure that I can make a dent in that money in one of the bars in Copenhagen. Yes. And yeah, I had never thought I'd win the money, so I haven't got any plans for it.
Not yet, no. And the other obvious reason would be the rest would be in the future research of your work, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you very much, Emily, and thank you for sharing this story with us.
Thank you for having me.
I think that if you're watching that you could become a transplantation professional that we hear much more of. You're on your way to become a transplant surgeon, right?
That's the plan, yeah.
So good luck with that as well.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're starting off on a high. Hello and welcome to ESOT's Transplant Live platform. If you are a transplantation professional anywhere in the world looking for high quality education, you've come to the right place. Because ESOT aims to inspire, connect and innovate the global transplantation community. We do so by creating the most attractive educational content. through face-to-face meetings like the ESOT 2019 Congress right here in Copenhagen, in print, and through this online platform that you have already discovered. And right now you are participating in something truly unique in the transplantation community, because we will be live for 24 hours during the 4 days of the ESOT 2019 Congress in Copenhagen. And what can you expect? Well, obviously we take you live into the halls where the sessions are taking place, giving you the latest insights in the field of transplantation. We will also show you recordings of other sessions that are going on in parallel. We'll show you interviews and reports with some of the key thought leaders and opinionators that walk around in this Congress. And in between, we'll show you some great examples of the education that you can find in the Transplant Live platform and some of the best sessions of the Congress in Barcelona 2 years ago. So don't be selfish and share the URL esottransplantlive.org with all your friends and colleagues and tell them why you decided to sign up. And then just keep your browser open. You start once, stay tuned, because it's happening right now. Good morning and welcome back here live from the Bella Center. It's the 4th and last day of the ESOT 2019 Congress here in Copenhagen, and we're about to kickstart our last day with a last state-of-the-art session number 9, which is titled The Patient's Definition. And it's all about the newly ways to report on outcomes, because traditionally transplantation is reported by graft survival, patient survival, but what about the patient's experience? There's new parameters you can report on: the patient-reported outcome, patient-reported experience, and this session will dive all into that. And I would like to take you along in that session, but if you're now watching this on YouTube and Facebook, you should realize you're benefiting from a free sample of our 24-hour Transplant Live broadcast. And now is the time to hop over, and if you haven't done so, register for ESOT's educational platform Transplant Live. And you do that by surfing to esottransplantlive.org. Sign up once and you have access to the platform throughout the year, where you can stay with us throughout the rest of the morning and follow both the state-of-the-art session and the plenary 4 closing session, where we'll have an outlook to where transplantation will be for the next 10 and 20 years. And you will have access to a vast library of all the recordings of sessions recorded both here in Copenhagen, in Barcelona, in Brussels. And there's a wide array of courses that you can participate in, and those courses will give you permanent education credits as well. So if you haven't done so, now is the time. In a moment, I'm going to have another bicycle ride through Copenhagen with Thomas Resch, who is a board member of the Young Professionals in Transplantation. And if you want to ask him questions, and you're watching this right now on Facebook and YouTube, type your questions in the comments and I'll pitch them to him live. But first, I'd like to take you back to an interview I had earlier here in this studio with Ina Jochmans. Ina Jochmans was the chair of plenary session number 3 yesterday, which was all about the hottest topic of this Congress right here in Copenhagen, and that is machine perfusion. And we explored why that topic is coming up right now and what it means for transplantation professionals around the globe. So let's have a look at that interview. So I'm now joined by Ina Jochmans from Leuven in Belgium, who is an expert on one of the key topics being discussed here at ESOT Congress in Copenhagen, machine perfusion. Ina.
Yeah, yes, indeed, organ perfusion.
Organ perfusion through machines and technologies. Why is that topic now the talk of the town?
Why is it exploding? I guess because over the past 15 years, some pioneers have invested a lot of time and energy in developing this technique, because we've seen that static cold storage is becoming too simple for the type of organs that we're currently preserving. And what organ perfusion actually offers us is a platform to not only preserve organs and perhaps even preserve them in a better way, But we can also assess their viability, so actually take them for a test drive, like you would do for a used car. And what we're also seeing is emerging technologies that will probably be able to help us repair and recondition an organ during preservation, and the last two bits are unseen in transplantation. And over the past 15 years, those technologies have actually reached the stage where they can enter clinical trials and actually enter clinical practice itself. So that's what we're seeing, that turnaround now. That's been a technology that's currently being picked up by the Transplant Society.
Exactly, and it basically means it takes off the extreme rush from the organ being ex vivo that used to be in the past, and creates a new phase.
Yes, that would be one. That would be one potential thing. There is some suggestion in the evidence that we can indeed go on and preserve organs for a longer period of time, which does take away the stress and spares the surgeon's coronaries. We're not there quite yet, but the evidence that's there seems to suggest that we might actually get to sleep at night.
Exactly, because you are, that would be something.
Yeah, imagine.
Really well planned out transplantation surgery.
Yes,
wow.
yes, taking away the rush, taking away the emergency and making it into an elective procedure, which is better for the patient.
Yeah, for a lot of things.
But also for the logistics.
Yeah. Because you'll be the chair and you've been designing the plenary 3 session, which is titled Perfect Organ Preservation and Reconditioning. Is it an elusive dream? And in that session, 5 different visionaries will share their dream, and then you will debate the challenges. Let's start with the first part. What dreams can we expect to hear in that session?
Yeah, so when Harry Leuvenink and I were thinking as to how we can do a plenary in ESOT style and make it fun and interactive, we thought it would be good to introduce this concept to the general audience of the Transplantation Society and design a plenary session that would be highly interactive and in a different way. And so the dreams that we're referring to is actually not only preserving organs, but going towards what I would see is the future of transplantation. That are actually organs that are available on demand, so we don't have to wait for anything. You open the fridge, for example, and they're there, or open the cupboard. That are non-immunogenic, which means that we wouldn't need any immune suppression, and that are non-injured, so really the perfect organ, as you would have seen in sci-fi movies, I guess.
Exactly.
And so although that dream's a long way off, I think there is evidence from this conference and beyond the conference that might not actually be an unrealistic dream, and we might actually be able to get there.
Wow, very exciting. However, second part of the session, the grand challenges. How far are we on our journey to that dream?
Yes, well, obviously I'm not going to spoil everything for Plenary 3.
Because this is actually a teaser for people to come join you.
Oh, is it a teaser? Okay, come join us.
Yeah.
So we have 5 visionaries who are going to come in very brief talks explain to us what they see as the future of organ perfusion and organ preservation. And all of them have their specific expertise, and what we're going to do in the debate session is actually talk to them and then to other experts that are going to join us into teasing out exactly where it is that we are, evidence-wise, trial-wise, basic science-wise, mechanisms behind everything, and kind of sketch how far along the road towards that perfect endpoint that we've come.
And if we draw a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the perfect dream, and 1 is just an idea on a piece of paper, where would you say we are? There is some clinical practice, there is some scientific evidence?
Definitely.
Where are we on that scale?
Very difficult question to ask, and people are going to resent me for saying this. Probably maybe a 4 or a 5.
Exactly.
So I think
still on the low side.
On the lower side, because, and I think Stefan Schneeberger told you or discussed this with you, what we're currently seeing is the push of years and years of preclinical work, of a new innovation getting into clinical practice. And we've really laid the cornerstones of the building that needs to be built, and we've started building it. And what we're seeing is that people are picking up not only on the technology, but are realizing what the potential of the technology might be. So the interaction with drugs or stem cells and repair, the discovery of how an isolated organ works if you take it away from the body. And all of these concepts are there. There's proof of principle, but actually making that happen, understanding how it works, and then making the leap and the jump towards actually tailoring preservation to the organ is, I think, a little while off.
A huge gap, yeah.
Yeah, but if you then see how quickly that the field and evidence is actually moving and how exponentially that goes, I think we might make it from a 4 to 5 to 7 or 8 in a fairly quickly. Fairly quickly.
So if people are watching this, they're young or even senior transplantation professional, and they want to contribute, where is the research needed? What are the hot topics that people, if it's up to you, should dive into?
Yeah, I think it depends on where their expertise would be. For clinicians, I think it would be extremely valuable if we could share our experience on international basis by connecting and networking with each other, learning from each other, because as this is a new technology, it requires...
First translated into practice, what happens?
It requires expertise at this point, and really you're going from a few expert centers who are using the technology towards implementing that on a wide scale, and going from something that someone with a lot of experience is using, going to a plug-and-play device requires training. And so that's one thing that we need people in. So education and training, sharing experience. From those that are interested in contributing to the science, I think we need people who want to invest in getting funding and doing good research, because everything starts with good research, and we need international collaborations to do that. There's not a single center that can get the amount of patients that you would need to do good clinical trials. So that's something else. We would very much benefit from having people contribute to large registries so that we amount data, so that in a few years' time we can actually dive into that, use AI and big data analysis to come up with mechanisms and things we're not seeing yet. So that's something. And if you're a basic scientist who's interested in mechanisms of ischemia reperfusion injury or immunology, I think this offers a unique opportunity to study your field in a well-controlled, isolated environment. So I think there's something for everyone, really.
Exactly, and there's a very clear call to action: join the movement, right?
Yeah,
in one way or another.
Absolutely.
And keep sharing.
Yes, we need you.
Very exciting stuff. Ina, thank you very much for sharing this.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We look forward to follow you on your sessions. And if you missed that plenary session, you know that it will be available on ESOT's educational platform, Transplant Live. So if you haven't done so, sign up and look back.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Yes, this was an interview I had earlier with Ina Jochmans from Leuven, the chair of Plenary 3. And if you're curious to watch a recording of that session, make sure you hop over to esottransplantlive.org, where you have the library of all the recorded Congress sessions here in Copenhagen. Well, speaking about Copenhagen, Copenhagen is the creative capital. It is the capital of bicycles. So that's why we're now riding through Copenhagen together with Thomas Resch, a board member of the YPT. And as I said to Thomas earlier, I hate abbreviations. It's the Young Professionals in Transplantation, a network of young transplant professionals connecting, developing. Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining me on this ride to beautiful Copenhagen. It's nice and sunny out.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to have a little exercise here at the Congress. Quite enjoying myself here with you on that bike ride. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad. Let's ride along a bit and let's explore. The Young Professionals in Transplantation, or let's now refer to it as the YPT, have been hosting a few sessions and activities here in the Congress.
Yeah.
Let's zoom in on a specific one that took place earlier on crisis management. What was the title of that session?
Yeah, it was quite a bit of a different format, and we were a little anxious about this, how people would react to this session, because it was a little different. So it was not simply showing data. It was, we had the idea, young professionals in transplant, they will encounter critical situations in their everyday lives as they arise. And they will bring him or her to their limits, to their personal limits. So we thought it might be a good idea to have interesting personalities, people invited to talk about crisis management. And these people really knew what they were talking about. We had, we had a former ambassador, a British ambassador to the UN and NATO, who was in charge. He was one of the people who were in charge of solving the Gulf War crisis back in the 90s.
Yeah,
so he
big
was
team.
Sir Stuart Eldon, so he definitely knew what he was talking about. He gave us a very inspiring talk about how to stay cool and master such situations. Now, but we had other people invited. We had a CEO, not a CEO, it was Anneliese Ponkier who gave us advice. We had a surgeon, Judges Frakas, and we had a Marine captain from the British Army. And what was quite interesting was that there were a lot of parallels between the Army and the OR, which might sound a little odd and ridiculous at first.
Yeah.
But then he told us about how they are preparing for critical situations such as the battlefield.
Yeah.
And what they are doing in the Army is what they call wargaming.
Yeah.
They go through a battle situation in advance, just in their minds. The whole team sits together and they talk through such a battle.
When you say war game, in this day and age, I would actually already expect they are literally gaming and shooting. But you say this is a talkative session.
Yeah. This is nothing to do with
computer games.
Online computer games.
No, okay.
They sit together as a team and they go through the different steps of a battle, and they think of what can go wrong and what do we do if in that situation. How can we troubleshoot? And I think this is something that is perfectly translatable to, let's say, a surgical unit. And this is a take-home message for me. We're definitely going to do this back home. Sit together as a surgical team, go through surgical procedures, and then together with, for example, Stefan Schneeberger as our head, talk with him how there's a bleeding in a big vessel, big bleeding. So you do one suture first. If that doesn't help and makes it only worse, what can you do next?
What is plan B? What is plan C?
What is plan C? What is plan... Exactly. So a lot of lessons to be learned. Also,
because if I make it a bit personal for you, you're a young transplantation professional. People might Google this video, find it, and look at you. What is a story, what is a moment you will never forget when you think about a crisis? You're a surgeon. What is a moment that will always stick with you?
Yeah, actually, it was during a liver transplantation when a friend of mine and I we did hepatectomy, and it was actually that situation that on the upper cava there was a big bleeding.
Yeah.
And what we did is do a first suture, and it only made it worse. And we did a second suture, and that only made it worse. And third, and it was already getting quite critical. We had a finger on it.
Was this the first time you encountered something like this?
No. When we were alone, with the young, the young were alone in the OR, and what we did is put the finger on it and call our senior.
Call for help,
Stefan, and he said us now change strategies, and that really worked. So, and I think if you do this in advance, and this is what we can learn from these guys from the Army, from that Army captain, this is something that can really help to avoid critical situations and make you more professional in it. Now, that was another lesson. Something interesting he said. It was, he said, when you're in battle, and he was in Afghanistan, he was decorated there, he said when you're in battle and you have to start to think how to reload your gun, you'll probably be dead by then.
Exactly.
And again, this is something which can be compared to, converted to the OR. When it's the first time you have to do something like this, it's probably a good idea that you train for that as best as possible, maybe in experimental models or...
Exactly. So at least you have kind of a muscle memory basis to always go back on.
Exactly what he called it. The muscle has to be all in your muscle memory. As soon as you have to think, having to start to think about how to do it, it's probably a bad idea. As a soldier, as probably as a physician, as a surgeon, as a transplant coordinator, as a nurse, whatever YPT, whatever young professional in transplant.
Yeah, and I can also imagine if you describe the situation with the two young guys, obviously you're not young, you're educated, you're certified, you're now responsible for your own surgery. There is a, well, how does it feel if you if you have to give up, or so to say, like we cannot handle this anymore, you have to escalate and call a more senior person? That I can imagine that feels like failing, right? So if you've had the talk before and this is a serious scenario, and everybody knows, dude, this can happen, call me.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. There's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Exactly, exactly that.
And this was also handled in the talk by the UN ambassador, who solved this crisis in the Gulf War, asked other people, communicate, and this is what he said is just key to solving such critical situations. Yeah. It's not staying on your own, keeping it for you. Communication at best possible level.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take away as lesson also that this, yes, you can say communicate, but it's good, I think, to understand that your primary emotion is to fix it yourself,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that is not the most natural thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah. But know your limits is also, I think, something which is quite important. And this is also something Annalisa pointed out as the perspective from the CEO. As a CEO, also she gave us advice how to stand up when you have a failure, a critical situation. It's a critical situation you didn't master as well as or as good as you wanted to. You have to be prepared for the next situation coming up. Yeah. Yeah, and her tip was, own up to it, so take responsibility and be open about the fact that there's things to be improved? Or? Well, he and the UN ambassador both used the word, build a little Chinese wall. So you have to, after such a hard day, with a lot of crisis in, you have to start relaxing at some point. And there's this little wall, and beyond that, there's time for family, time for private life. Okay. Relax, and then recover, and you will be able to do that. But it's the critical thing is to build that little wall.
Exactly.
So that was their lesson.
Because one of the things that fascinates me, and I guess might be interesting if you're an even younger professional in transplantation and getting into the field, obviously I'm not a transplantation professional myself, so what I realize is that you literally work with the life of someone else in your hands. And everybody makes mistakes when they work. I make mistakes when I'm on camera here, but then that doesn't matter that much. How do you deal with the stress and pressure? Is that being touched on? Because you're gonna make mistakes. And in your job, that might mean that someone loses their life. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think what is absolutely key is that you're not thinking about if I'm doing this wrong, this person is going to die.
Exactly, that cannot be on your mind.
Exactly, and I think this is comparable to what the soldier said. It's step by step by step by step, and training as much as possible in the pre-field, and then do that professionally, stepwise, and not to think about it as probably as a whole, and not too.
Beautiful. Beautiful, and I think it's nice and important to see that the YPT brings these kind of topics also into this Congress. Yesterday we had another session about stress management for transplantation professionals that was very highly attended, and a lot of people were watching that and talking about it. And it's funny because this is a super scientific medical Congress, right? It should be all about the science. But in the meantime, we're all humans, we're professionals, and I guess these kind of topics need to be addressed as well. So thank you very much for sharing. Now, if somebody watches this and they wonder, how can I become a part of the young professionals in transplantation? Where can they go?
Yeah, YPT is all about connecting young professionals in transplant. And this is exactly the key point. Of course, we will be present at various conferences, but in the time between conferences, it's absolutely crucial that we can engage the YPTs out there. So we've got the YPT map, a map all of it where Europe is shown and the specific centers. And YPTs can sign up for this map. So if if I want to do a little fellowship, maybe in Oxford, learn something about kidney transplantation, who shall I call? So I go on the map, I find maybe Sijan Akhtar popping up, and I can ask him from a young professional to a young professional, is it worthwhile coming to your place?
Exactly.
Will I really learn a lot there? Or shall I maybe go somewhere else? And who can I ask?
Yeah, literally the networking taking place.
Exactly. So from we would like to encourage the communication between young professionals. And I think this is the first step. This is now being launched. There will be a newsletter very soon. And we hope as many YPTs as possible will sign up for this. So this whole network is going to become huge.
Nice. Well, Thomas, careful with riding without no hands here in the city of Copenhagen. But
thank you.
Thank you for riding along with me. Thank you for watching this, and I hope to see you at some future YPT events. In the meantime, we're getting ready here in Copenhagen for the first session of today, the State of the Art number 9, which is all about the patient's definition of outcome. If you want to watch that, make sure you hop over to esottransplantlive.org, where that session will be live broadcasted. And if you're curious where that session is about, I earlier met up with one of the chairs of the sessions, Luc Hillebrands, and asked him that exact question.
State of the Art session 9 is about the patient's perspective. Traditionally, we look at outcomes like survival and organ function, but what really matters is what patients have for benefit of transplantation. So we will focus on how to measure that. We will focus on patient-reported outcome measures in clinical trials, especially in renal disease and renal transplantation. And we will also emphasize the topic of what does a patient expect from a transplantation, and who can tell this better than a patient himself. So we will include in this session an organ transplant recipient who will tell what he expects from a transplantation and what he thinks is important. If you want to have this unique opportunity to learn about the patient's perspective in transplantation, you have to join us in State of the Art Session 9.
Core messages that you will have after today's discussion. So let's start with a definition of quality of life. We need this at the start of these 4 talks. There's at least 25 published definitions of what quality of life is. We spent 20 years in my field arguing about the definition of quality of life. What a waste of time. So we've got to the point where we say we have a working definition of quality of life, and that it is subjective. It's subjective. It's the patient knows best. We have a lot of data now, many studies that compare the physician and the patient. And it's clear that the physician's assessment is not the same as the patient's assessment. It's clear, for example, when a patient reports a high level of pain, the physician doesn't report the same amount of pain. So the use of physician assessment in quality of life is not regarded as something that you should do. It's multidimensional, and we say it's physical, social, and emotional functioning. And these are key factors along with symptoms that patients have. And it's dynamic, meaning it changes over time, and it's particularly important in oncology and particularly important for you when you have an intervention where you can see, hopefully, a good effect very quickly. Now, I need to put it in context because I come from the European Organization for Clinical Trials of Research, and we're really a non-profit society, and maybe you've got something like this